Welcome to By the Books, the podcast helping business owners navigate the complex world of business, tax, and bookkeeping. Now, to the owner and president of Kline, Lindsay Kline.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. This is Lindsay Kline with Kline, honest, accurate bookkeeping performed on time, and your host of By the Books. I'm here today with Kirk Coyne, who is the founder and CEO of RMS Advisory Group. They provide CFO and business advisory services to small and mid-sized businesses, helping them grow profitably. And the biggest thing is helping business owners increase the value of their business,
Correct.
Which is what we're talking about today.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So you and I, we've connected several times now and talked a lot about this topic of increasing your value. And I remember you telling me, and this has stuck with me, that there's going to be an exit. One way or the other, a business owner is going to exit. It may be because of death. It may be because of retirement. It may be because they passed it on to their legacy, to their family, or it could be because they sell it. But one way or the other, there is an exit. And I remember you telling me that, and I was like, I never thought of it that way, you know, but you telling me always have the exit in mind, and one way or the other, you want to increase the value as much as you can. So that's kind of the premise of what you do, right?
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is most business owners don't really start thinking about their exit until it's too late. Like they're ready to exit in a month. Well, I mean, that's the honest truth. I mean, I've got a couple of clients currently or prospects I was talking to, and one example is a fellow that owns a tree service company in San Antonio. And he found me and contacted me about 3 months ago and said, you know, I'm 67 years old. I'm thinking about retiring, so I would like to explore selling my business. Well, I said, well, great. Better late than never, right?
Right.
So we started having a conversation about his business. He's had it 40 years. I said, is it profitable? Yeah, it's profitable. He gave me a few big picture numbers. Wasn't a big business, small business, but has had it for quite some time. And I said, I'd be happy to help you. Can you, I'll send you an email with the information I need to get an initial idea, which always requires financial statements, among other things, which you're going to get a kick out of some of these stories, because a lot of times it's amazing what you see. But he never got anything to me. I followed up with him periodically by text. I didn't even have his email, actually. I said, can you send me your email? So I texted him. I did have his phone number because he called me on the mobile. Never responded to my text, and then until finally I asked him, have you found, because he was shopping other people to help him with his exit, and I said, did you find somebody to help you? And he said no in his text. I said, okay, great. Still no. I said, well, I'm happy to help, and still nothing. 3 months later or 4 months later, he calls me again. Says, you remember me? I said, yeah, I remember you. Sure. How are things going? Are you working on selling your business? I closed it. Excuse me? Yeah, I closed the business because my main guy left.
Oh, no.
And so now I'm ready to sell whatever I have left. I said, and what would that be? And well, I've got some equipment. Okay, what do you think that's worth? He gives me some numbers, and then I'd like to sell my customer list for another. That's going to be as goodwill. I said, well, it's kind of hard to get value for goodwill when the business isn't operating anymore. But and then I again asked him to send me some information. I'll see what sort of opportunity there might be to salvage this thing. And in the end, he never did send me anything.
Oh, no.
Which is probably just as well. It's one that I don't think honestly that we're going to be able to do much for him. But that's the kind of thing you run into, and it's very sad. The smaller the business, the more likely that is. But there's even some decent sized businesses that, believe it or not, don't start thinking about that time until it's imminent. Either because, a personal issue, death or divorce, a health issue, whatever it might be. And it's a shame because at that time, it's usually too late to really make modifications in the business to make it more attractive, more sellable, more valuable, right? Because that's a strategic change in the business oftentimes.
Right.
And the biggest challenge that I find is getting business owners' attention early enough on in their process. In fact, we say, the best time to start thinking about your exit is when you start your business.
Right. I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, exactly. And you're doing a good job of thinking about those things when you're not buried in the day-to-day, which we'll get into, that issue in and of itself. So it is a very important subject. I mean, for most business owners, their business is their single biggest asset, which they may or may not have any idea what it's worth. Mm-hmm. Most of them don't. And even less of an idea of how they would make it more valuable. So that's what I do, why I do what I do, and it's amazing the situations that you come across.
So whenever you say the best time to start is when you start your business, that means the time is now, right? No matter where you're at in your business, the time is now to start thinking about this.
It is, and the reason why it may not be that you plan to sell your business in 3 or even 5 or even 10 years, but would you still not want to make that asset as valuable as you can?
Right.
The same way if you've got a stock portfolio, you don't want to just let it disappear and go to nothing. You want it to grow, right? That's why you invest in the stocks. Now, most business owners don't think of their business as an investment, but in a way they should, because ultimately the buyer of that business, if it's ever going to go on the market, is going to think of it as a investment.
Right.
And so it's kind of a change in paradigm and a mental shift that's difficult for some business owners to understand, that it's really important for them to look at their business from an outsider's point of view, which that's where I try to help them think that way, so that they can start making changes in their business that would make it more attractive. And not only does it make it more attractive to a buyer, it creates options for them down the road. It's not so much that they're getting it ready to sell, because if that's not in their plans, it's that they have the advantage of knowing they could sell it if they needed to. If one of those life events happened, or if a suitor comes along that they really liked, and maybe it's a strategic buyer or somebody that they know well that they think it would be a good match for, they've gotten to the point where they've prepared for that. Not only the business, but in their in their head as well. So,
well, and I think there's a little bit of a misnomer out there with some business owners anyway, that increasing the value of your business just means I have to grow it, I have to have more employees. That's not true. You can increase the value of your business without necessarily increasing the size. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're very correct. And there's different types of business owners, right? And even in this value builder system, we'll talk about. They refer to freedom fighters, mountain climbers, and craftsmen. And the mountain climbers are the ones that want growth at all costs. Big revenue growth, not Fortune, but Inc. 5,000 kind of growth. It's that's how they measure themselves. And I've seen several of those where they've succeeded in growing the top line. Bottom line, not very good. Margins, not very good. The business structure, there's issues. So it's not necessarily a valuable business just because they got a lot of revenue there.
So you can grow your revenue without necessarily growing the value of your business.
Absolutely. And a lot of it depends too on, is that growth sustainable? Is it because of, 1 or 2 large customers that the owner cultivated over time, and that's generated most of their revenue? It may not even be the most profitable source of revenue, but it's paying the bills. And frankly, the way most business owners, when they start and grow their business, maybe you're even experiencing it yourself, you're trying to get customers any way you can, right? And so the growth is somewhat opportunistic. You land a big client or a big project, and that's the one that starts generating revenue, gives you some financial flexibility, hire some people, invest in some resources, And what happens? You keep feeding that elephant, that Goliath, instead of working on taking a step back and saying, okay, I have this customer, or maybe it's 2 or 3 of them, but is that really where I want to be? Is that where I should be? There's actually a good example in the founder of Value Builder System, John Warlow, tells about a fellow named Jason Fried that founded a company called Basecamp. And originally what he was doing was website development, design and development for large enterprise, big companies. There's 5,000, 10,000 people that do that, right? Mm-hmm. Very crowded market, et cetera. And in his case, because he was serving very large customers, he was beholden. He felt very beholden to those customers. They were controlling, sort of like the Walmart syndrome, right? You hear about companies that have landed a Walmart account. Blessing or curse. Right? A lot of times it's a curse, because next thing you know, Walmart's dictating how you run your business to the detriment of how you should be running it, and diversifying your customer base, which is one of the main value drivers. So what this guy, Jason, did is he ended up kind of pivoting, and instead of doing customized website development, he developed, with some help, I'm sure, a project management software that he could sell directly to small businesses, so that they could manage projects and then maybe even integrate it in their website design somehow. But I think it was more of a pivot, and ended up with 15 million subscribers paying $20 a month for his software. Well, that's $300 million a month in recurring revenue. So it's recurring revenue. It's allowed him to grow the business without so much stress on him. Very good example, I think, on kind of the strategic shift that sometimes is required to make your business more valuable, and it takes time to think about that stuff.
So, in thinking of the value of your company, we've touched on topics that are specific to revenue sources, which obviously, as you touched on, you don't want your revenue primarily coming from one source. From a prospective buyer's perspective, that's dangerous, because if you lose that client, half your business is gone.
Absolutely.
So you want a diversified set of customers, but also you mentioned the recurring revenue. That's seen as very valuable, subscription-based model revenue.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else that pertains to the revenue side of things that can help increase the value of your business?
On the revenue side, I would say that there's the way that you structure your future growth, because it's not only the growth that you're having, but it's the growth potential. And so, one of the premises, one of the value drivers is leave some field to sow for somebody else. Your end of your business is somebody else's beginning, right?
So they have to be able to see the potential in the future.
Exactly. So I'm not suggesting that you can have a business that's not generating any profitability, but you have this great plan for the future, so you're going to sell it because somebody sees your plan. Now, you do see that sort of thing happen in technology, frankly, quite a lot. These companies that have no revenue, and they get bought by Google or whoever it is, one of these tech companies, because of the idea, because they think that it's not something that they've created themselves, but they can take it to the next level. So that's kind of the exception in most basic businesses, whether they're service or product based. That's not something you see. Trying to think on the revenue side.
And I would think a diversified set of services, if you're a service company, or products, if you're a product company, does that help if you have a diversified set of product?
Interesting question. That's another thing that even, when I'm a licensee of this system called Value Builder System, and I've got 40 years in business, both big corporate as well as working with entrepreneurs, small businesses, and some of these things I hadn't even thought of in the same way. So one of the concepts that's integrated into the Value Builder System is sell sell your existing core products or services to more customers instead of selling more things to your existing customers. So that kind of addresses the customer diversification.
Okay. So it's better than you're saying to have less products than more products.
Less products that you're really good at making,
Gotcha.
services that you're really good at, where you have a differentiation. You have
Gotcha.
you have a system, you have an approach that is
No one else does.
that nobody else does, that's valuable. Instead of taking that and trying to see, okay, how do I get into another area with I've got 20 customers, it'd be easy enough to cross sell them some other
Right.
services I have, and that's that is a strategy, and a lot of times that will help, but it probably isn't going to take you to a value notch upward the same way
Gotcha.
as really honing it. Niche down is kind of the concept. That another one of these value builder stories was a lady called Stephanie Breedlove. So she was actually a lady working for Accenture, the former Anderson Consulting, full-time job. But she was a mother, had a nanny at home she had to pay, or that she had to pay, and she couldn't find any at the time. It was like 20 years ago. Couldn't find any of the big payroll processors that were interested in dealing with one person in that kind of situation. So she started a nanny payroll service, kind of on the side, while she was still working for Accenture, and started building up customers because other parents had this same issue. And then she got to a point where, it'd been growing 20% a year while she was still working full time. She said, well, I can take this, to the next level. But so she asked herself, and, probably consulted with others, what's the best way to do that? Do I take this concept of nanny payroll services and apply it to other household services, lawn care, landscaping, whatever it might be? Or do I take my core differentiation nanny service, very, very niche down, and find more parents that need to pay nannies and caregivers? And that's the route she went, and the business exploded.
Nice.
Ended up going to $9 million in revenue.
Wow.
And better yet, she sold it for $54 million to a company called Care.com, I think it was, which is, that's a multiple of that's 6 times revenues, not earnings, right? Revenues.
Wow,
So,
that's fantastic.
Because that company saw that was a niche that nobody else was providing, that they could, capture immediate value. It touched on a lot of those value drivers. It provided recurring source of revenue, so that was appealing. It provided more customers. That customer diversification, getting back to your point, that was appealing. It made it easier to teach employees and build a technology base to master that particular function. So it was sustainable revenue and sustainable earnings going forward.
So then business owners probably should focus more attention, I would think, on how they could, A, sell what they are currently good at, but B, how they could turn it into a subscription-based recurring revenue source.
Absolutely.
I know, like trades, for example, I know some of them are now offering like a maintenance program where you pay a monthly subscription and you get bumped to the top of the list. If you have any sort of issues, they'll come out and fix it for, I'm sure you have to pay more if you have a major issue, but you have a subscription that you're paying every month for those services.
Yeah. Yes. No. The recurring revenue is one of the main value drivers. That's both important in running the business and making it more profitable, but making it more valuable at the point of time when it's sold. Whether it's a subscription model, whether it's a membership model, there's. In fact,
Panera Bread is doing this now with coffee. Have you seen this?
No, but it's not.
You pay $8.99 a month and you get unlimited coffee. To me, this is ingenious because you're getting people in your store constantly.
Right.
There's probably people that come every day to Panera Bread to get their free cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And, obviously the idea is they're hoping they'll buy a muffin or, whatever else with
Right.
that.
So the recurring revenue isn't just from the membership or subscription fee. It extends
Right.
well, Costco is a great example, right?
Yes.
They have a membership fee model where, you pay, it's not really cheap, but in the giant scheme of things of what you buy at Costco, it's very cheap. But
So I'm
it
going
brings
to
people to
advocate
Costco.
because who I want to offer a subscription is Quick Trip. I am a Quick Trip fan, which is a gas station that's primarily in Texas, I think. But I go to Quick Trip pretty much every day to get my iced tea, which is with me right now, in fact. So QT, if you're listening, can you please offer a subscription-based model for your iced tea? I need this.
It's both in the customer's interest and the business interest. So,
I'm going every day anyway.
Yeah.
I was actually just thinking about that this morning. I'm like, man, they need to get on this Panera Bread idea with the iced tea.
Yeah, it's amazing how few companies actually. You're seeing more that are trying to integrate that into their business model, but a lot of them don't. A lot of them think, that doesn't really apply to my industry. But if you're willing to think out of the box and be a little bit creative, yeah, maybe you can, or at least something that resembles a membership or a subscription or a continual source of revenue.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason why a potential buyer would see that as valuable is because it's much more likely to withstand the test of time. That people don't tend to cancel their subscriptions very often. If they've signed up for a subscription, they want the service, it's usually an automatic payment system, right? Is that why it's seen as more valuable?
Yeah, exactly, because what's important to an acquirer is sustainable revenue and earnings. So when they look at a business, they're going to look at what the company's done historically, the last few years, and what its growth potential is. But they don't want to pay for the growth potential because that's what where they're going to get their value. They're willing to pay for the existing business that is sustainable. If it's a pure project-based business, which is what a lot of companies are, especially construction firms or those sorts of things, then every deal is a new deal.
Right.
So what you did this year isn't going to be immediately replicable unless you have a client base that somehow has a vested tie to the business.
So let's take a construction situation that you mentioned. So in the scenario you were talking about where every project is basically a new project, you've got to go sell yourself every single time versus maybe the construction company that has figured out a way to bring some recurring revenue where they're showing up at the same place every month to do some sort of construction maintenance or, I don't even know how that would work exactly, but that they're not having to go sell themselves every month. They're just showing up every month to perform the service, and it's just maintenance.
Right. Maintenance contracts, actually, not necessarily in construction, but in a lot of industries, another one of those models where you can have and you see those. Like the home warranty companies, those are service maintenance deals. Of course, every time somebody comes out for maintenance, they say, "Oh, well, actually, you need a new air conditioner," and so it's all, it's back to that. You have the recurring, that you're getting hit for $50 a month or whatever it is. But every time you have a problem, it's going to be, you're still going to pay something. But they never cover everything they say. So there's also an integrity issue here that, you need to, it's a whole package, right? You gotta be authentic and trustworthy. The company does. And that's where, the brand and the loyalty, all that reputation comes in. But you're right. Or maybe the construction company could have, develop some standardized products that are, that go along with or in addition to a specific project or independently of that, kind of evens out the revenue stream. That's not quite recurring revenue, but it's smoothing the revenue. So there's always things you can think about and implement in some shape or form. In some industries, some services, it's easier than others, but it's probably possible to tweak it in almost any of them.
Okay, that's good to know. So aside from finding subscription-based revenue streams and diversifying your customer base, what are some other things that business owners can do to increase the value of their business?
Minimize their importance in the business. So one of the biggest detriments to value in a business that is trying to increase the value. I'm not talking about a solopreneur that's more of the craftsperson. This stuff doesn't necessarily apply.
If you're a craftsperson, the solopreneur,
right.
as you mentioned, that's probably a service provider, for example. There could be a bookkeeper,
right?
That's providing bookkeeping services, but it's just them.
Yeah.
There's no one else. They are the company.
Yeah.
That is not going to be a very valuable business, is it?
No, it isn't. And that's the case with probably 50% of small businesses under let's say 500,000 in revenue. Is the business is so dependent on the owner that without the owner, the business ceases to exist. Excuse me. So who's going to want to come in and buy that business, right? or pay anything for it? I mean, why? Unless there's a situation where there's some technology, some system, something about that business that the owner has developed that can be passed on, taught, whatever it is, to the future buyer. Then there is something there.
So
And even
generally
the bookkeeper could have, they could try to set up recurring source. They could pull from some of these things, but their business is inherently going to be difficult to sell if it remains just them.
So generally speaking, the more dependence a business has on the owner, the less valuable it is.
Yes.
Okay.
As with a lot of these value drivers, it's kind of counterintuitive, sort of like the sell fewer things to more customers instead of more things to your existing customers. That's the easy thing to do, right? But the more valuable thing to do is to find more customers and sell your core offering that you're really good at. It's the same thing with the owner dependence, and it's hard for owners to understand sometimes. How can I make my business more valuable? Get out of the way. That doesn't always sit real well with business owners, especially founders. It's their baby, right? Whether it's a service or a product, nobody can do it as well as them, which is probably true. Which means that they're kind of stuck. They have a hard time delegating. They have a hard time letting go of things. They ultimately end up miserable because they're doing everything, wearing all the hats, reacting, have all the relationships with the customers. They're the one that gets called every time there's a problem. It's no wonder they burn out, right? And part of that's mental is to be able to let go. But if they, that's where it gets back, where I always start with clients, whether it's talking about an exit or just talking about improving their business, is Stephen Covey's begin with the end in mind. Where are you trying to go? What is your end game? And if they can articulate that, then you can make some progress. A lot of times they can't. It sometimes even relative to an exit, it's die at my desk kind of mentality. Well, I ask some owners, what's going to happen to this business when you are no longer around? I guess it'll shut down. Really? I mean, that to me is so disappointing because, one, if nothing else, maybe they don't have any kids that they want to pass the legacy on to, or maybe they can't stand their kids and just as soon not give them anything. That's fine. There's a lot of charities out there and useful ways to put that money to work in a good way that you've been building without knowing it. Sorry about that. For the last 30, 40 years.
That makes sense. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be passed down to your children, but I mean, this could be your retirement.
Could be your retirement. Well, and for a lot of them, they think it is their retirement. I mean, I have a client that was, when I first started talking to her, she sort of had a one person business, outsourced a bunch of different things, but had a big warehouse, brought in inventory from overseas, used the contract manufacturing. So really doing a lot of things for just basically one person. Maybe she had an assistant as well, but it was really a small business, but it was a business. But her goal was, I just want to be able to take out of this business X amount of money per year so that at the end of 8 years, I have enough money to retire. And I tried to remind her, well, okay, that's fine, and we can certainly try to work toward that goal. But what you may not realize is you may be able, your business itself, developed in the proper way, could be worth many times what that X amount of dollars for 8 years is, and but she didn't want to take the risks necessarily that might be involved, given where.
Well, and sometimes it's hard to let go. I can relate to that. It is difficult, especially when you've built this from nothing and you've put blood, sweat, and tears into something. I could see where it's difficult to give it to someone else, but that's exactly what you have to do to increase the value of your business, because a prospective buyer coming in, if they see it's that reliant on you, it's not going to be very appealing because you're going away.
Yeah, and maybe not initially. Maybe you stay around for a year, but you are going away eventually.
Right.
Yeah.
So what is a prospective buyer buying? Because they can't keep you, so they've got to be able to sustain the business without the owner.
Absolutely.
So that makes complete sense.
Yeah, I would say the owner dependence and the customer concentration tend to be the most common detriments to selling a business. So those are the two
single biggest things people can do then.
Well, that they need to work on, yeah. Right. I mean, if you go down Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I guess, getting a little bit into your space, if you don't have reasonably decent financial performance, if the business is losing money every year, and there's a business model issue, or even if it's making money, but you're 2 years behind in your taxes and you don't have monthly financial statements, and when somebody asks to see the financials, and I run into business that want to sell, and first thing I ask, I need to look at your financial statements to get at least a first glance look at how the business is doing. Some of them don't even have them. I'm talking to one right now, a restaurant, that they had their tax returns from the prior 2 years. They had financial statements, looked fine, but they got hit by COVID, right, in 2020, so it wasn't very good. We're looking at this year. They say, oh, yeah, much better. Okay, good. Can you give us any financial statements? We don't have those. I'd have checked with the CPA. They check with their CPA. They come back. No, it's not really feasible to get interim financial statements. It wouldn't be cost effective. Okay. So last year wasn't very good. You lost money. You say you're doing better this year, but they were able to generate. These are we said at least give us some indications. They send some sales reports that come out of their point of sale system, and 14 pages instead of one that had January, February, March, April. But anyway, we can work with that. We can add it all up, right, and come up with the revenues and they're up. They are up some. Okay, well, how do we translate that into profitability that somebody else is going to believe?
So a prospective buyer, I would think, if they see a situation where an owner can't provide good financial reports and statements, that's going to be a red flag, I would imagine.
It is.
Because then it's like, okay, well, how many other areas of the business are kind of just basically they're calling it in, I guess we would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was my first reaction, without rudely saying that to him. I mean, how in the heck do you manage your business if you don't even know if you're making money or not? I mean, that's kind of, but it's amazing, again, how often you see that. And even when they have financial statements, some of them, ask my accountant is the biggest expense item. Or,
oh, yes.
Or
that's a big no-no in our company. I'm telling my staff all the time, if it says miscellaneous or other or ask my accountant, we do not use it.
Absolutely. And if you don't have that basic quality of financial information and a system to, and there's all, QuickBooks makes it about as easy as you can make it, right? And yet still there's people that can't seem to even come up with basic information.
That's a job security for us in the bookkeeping arena.
It is.
So we help people with that.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, a company that I'm working with, unbelievably, has $6 or $7 million in revenue.
That's great.
Been profitable up and down. But and they use QuickBooks. So I said, well, who handles your QuickBooks stuff? The owner. The owner's doing the QuickBooks. The owner's doing the payroll. The owner's running the operations. The owner's helping his wife with her medical practice on the side. I'm thinking, well, no wonder, it's hard to really make fundamental changes in the business to
because it's so reliant on the owner.
Exactly. And very smart people. I mean, in this case, it's but even there, you run into it. Very, very surprising.
Is there any other final last things that business owners should know to increase the value of their business?
Well, when we talk actually in the value builder, model of 8 value drivers, they're kind of buckets of drivers, but one of them is Switzerland structure. Why is it called Switzerland structure? Because Switzerland is known to be an independent country. In wars they didn't take sides, and they have sort of a tax haven situation, all that. And so that one touches on not only the don't be too dependent on a single customer, but don't be too dependent on a single employee or supplier. Because either of those, what if that, like the tree service guy, he was too dependent on a single employee. The employee decides to quit, retire, and his business closes. Same thing with the vendor. Say you are buying most of your key raw material from a single supplier. You don't have or it's such a specialized product, or maybe it's a service that they've never pursued other options. That company decides to buy a competitor of you, and so they don't
they don't want to service you anymore,
right? And then you're high and dry. So that's another one that is broader than just it's diversification of not only customers but also your employee, your talent base, as well as your vendor and supplier base.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So keep things diversified in all areas.
Yeah, well, you don't want to be too reliant on anything that could, whether it's the owner or those other 3 that I mentioned, that could, render the business worthless, or at least devalue the business if something were to happen to any of those areas. And a lot of times, business owners don't really have the time, they think, to be thinking about those things far enough in advance, or maybe they think they don't have the resources to do something about it, but they really have to in some shape or form. At least have a contingency plan.
This is good. I think this is really valuable, good information for business owners to have. And I know I've learned today, even though I know we've talked about most of this stuff before. Right. There's things that as I'm reviewing this again, I'm thinking, I could be doing that a little bit better.
Yeah, and different, whether it's the 8 drivers or other ways to look at what's driving the value of the business. You can't work on everything at the same time. So yes. It's important to kind of have a plan to review, explore, diagnose, and improve as you go, different areas. And one of the things lacking in most small businesses is a forward-looking plan other than what's in the owner's head. And what I try to explain to business owners is it's not the plan itself. Dwight D. Eisenhower said a plan is useless, but planning is essential. It's the process of looking forward at your business, because the elements that impact your forward path are always going to change. External factors, COVID hits, something happens with a competitor or a customer, so you got to adjust. But that doesn't mean don't plan. You work off things that you think are going to help the business going forward, and you adjust as circumstances change.
That makes sense. So this is what you do. You help people grow in all of these areas, help them get their business ready to sell for the most amount of money. So how can people find you if they're wanting to get your help with this?
Well, I can look up my company on the internet, rmsadvisorygroup.com. They can call me, 972-689-1981. And I do offer complimentary consultations. I mean, the first discussion is always trying to understand the business owner's needs and
have
desires.
your financials ready.
Yeah, well, that would be step two. I mean, step one is what are you trying to accomplish? Back to Covey, begin with the end in mind. If that's not clear, well, we need to work on that. And then once you know where you're trying to go, where are you? Which means, where am I making money? I don't know. I don't have financials, or I don't. Maybe they have financials, but they really don't know where they're making money. There's more than just the P&L and the balance sheet, right? It's what's my profitability by customer and margin by customer, by geographic area, by product, by service. Why do I have 10 services when 8 of them aren't making any money and 2 are, and that sort of thing.
So you'll help walk people through.
Take a deeper dive. Yeah,
That's
exactly,
good.
and then help prioritize the plan going forward to work on each of those areas methodically. And, sometimes it's hard for business owners to be able to free up the time and effort to do that. But I remind them it'll be well worth your while when it's time to exit, or when it's time to go on vacation and not have to worry about the place falling apart when you come back, which is, unfortunately, often the concern of an owner.
That's good. All right. So any business owners that would like to increase the value of your business, talk to Kirk. He is a wealth of information and knowledge in this area. So thank you so much for joining me today. This has been great.
Thank you, Lindsay, for having me. I enjoyed it.
I always enjoy talking to you. I always learn. And I like to be around people that teach me. So this is good.
That's good and I never stop learning by talking to other people.
There you
it's
go.
About what they do or what I do.
That's fantastic.
It's a two-way street.
And I'm Lindsay Kline with Kline, honest, accurate bookkeeping, performed on time, and your hosted by the books. Until next time, everyone, have a great week.
By the Books is presented by Kline, honest, accurate bookkeeping performed on time. For more information on Kline services or to get a hold of Lindsay, visit Kline.com or email info@Kline.com.
The information provided on this website and podcast does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Instead, all information, content, and materials available are for general information purposes only. Information provided by Kline may not constitute the most up-to-date legal or other information. Listeners should contact their attorney to obtain advice with respect to any particular legal matter and should refrain from acting on the basis of this information without first seeking legal advice from counsel in the relevant jurisdiction. Only your individual attorney can provide assurances that the information contained herein and your interpretation of it is applicable or appropriate to your particular situation.